Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Skull Session Recruiting Podcast, brought to you by BuckeyeHuddle.com. I am Mark Givler. I was talking on Saturday night, or we were talking on Saturday night about how we'd be back on Monday with a full kind of update on Ohio State recruiting, but instead, Ohio State has landed a couple of commitments here on Sunday, and the first one we're going to talk about is four-star defensive end Dre Quinn out of Buford, Georgia. Very familiar place for Ohio State, very familiar place for Larry Johnson, getting Edric Houston out of there a couple of years ago. This was Larry Johnson's top priority the last couple of months since Quinn decommitted from Clemson. And now he's a Buckeye after committing Sunday morning here, coming out of his official visit this weekend for the UCLA game. We had felt this was trending in the right direction and that things could be looking pretty good going into the weekend, but always nice to get the confirmation with the actual commitment. And, he didn't go home and think about it for a few days and, get cold feet. He immediately, Sunday morning, bright and early, probably before most people were even going to church, committed to the Buckeyes. So the defensive end situation looks a lot better now, doesn't it?
It looks fantastic to me. When we look at Kari Wilder, who is just continued since the Buckeyes offered him, and he committed a week and a half later. Then there was that Rivals camp, and everybody saw who he really was at that Rivals camp as he just demolished all the 5-star tackles at the camp. And now he's, the top defensive lineman in the country per Rivals. And we've kind of been waiting, okay, who are we going to pair with him in this class? And there's been a lot of options, as we've seen, in some very high profile misses that had people very concerned as to would they be able to find somebody. Then you had the entire top 300 committed. So the Buckeyes on the prowl here late, as they were at a lot of spots. Dre Quinn decommits, and Dre Quinn, a heck of a prospect, man. A heck of a prospect at 6'4", 225, athletic enough to play tight end. And when you watch him run routes at tight end, which they do have some in this highlight reel. I mean, the guy could definitely play at a big time school at tight end if he so chose. There's no doubt about it. Just a tremendous athlete. He's long. He's got a great feel for the game. And I think that obviously what we've heard from personality wise, family wise, like he is absolutely a real kind of guy that they want in the program, which, usually when you hear that, it's a guy who's got his priorities straight, knows his goals, just very much about his football, gets along well with others, like all the things that we know they look for. And they do such a tremendous job bringing guys into the program that have that kind of attitude. But this one is one that I've consistently heard really fits in with the program. So all in all, this is going to turn out just fantastic. If we just said early on, we're going to get Kari Wilder and Dre Quinn, there would have been no need for any of the consternation that was had throughout this class. But this is a big one, Mark. It's a real big one to be able to pop this off this late. Something we don't usually see, and really exciting.
Yeah, Quinn transferred into Buford for his senior year. So if you're a little confused on the uniform colors on some of this video, that's why. Very explosive, very athletic, can really run plays down, has that great get off that Larry Johnson looks for. Plays extremely hard, so really with Larry Johnson, it's kind of two things. It's get off and motor. If you have those two things, I think he's pretty much willing to try and fix the rest of whatever ails you. But and if you don't have those two things, you're just not going to be recruited by Ohio State. So he checks a lot of the boxes. I think he's a good complement to Kari Wilder. The thing I like about both of them is that they're both bigger bodied right now in terms of being, 240-ish. They're not coming in at 215 and you've got to, wait a couple years to get them up to 255, 260. These are guys who I think are going to be able to slot in pretty early in their college careers. I'm not going to sit here and call them day one starters or anything like that, but I do think, like we've seen Zion Grady this year. It would surprise me if we couldn't see the same type of thing out of both of these guys. Especially with maybe some potential openings there on the depth chart, depending on what all the decisions are made here this offseason. But really, really good pickup. Again, this was Larry Johnson's top target here the last couple months. This is who he really zeroed in on. We kind of talked about that on the podcast. We talked about it a little bit on the message board and site, just that this is the guy to watch here over the last several weeks. And sure enough, commits coming out of that official visit this morning. And again, huge tandem now. Defensive line recruiting all of a sudden, Juck. I mean, it's probably not the best defensive line class they've ever signed on paper with Larry Johnson, but it certainly is it's up to the standard, in my opinion. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. With Dre, for instance, I mean, when you look at him just as a prospect, and he is again just barely a 4-star, down 420 in the country, which I think is just kind of silly. And we've talked before about, after your top 100, from 100 to 400, it's not so much about that individual prospect, but what you want, what you are looking for as a program, and how you want to utilize him. And this guy is interchangeable with any one of those defensive ends you would find from 150 down to 400 as far as talent and skill and ability. So, I had some people saying he's just barely a 4-star and not very happy about it. I wouldn't put that much stock into that. When you look at him as a prospect, I mean, he's got everything they're looking for, and he's pretty unique as to what they got on the roster right now. In addition to that, with this class right now with 6 guys committed, I love taking a few extra shots. As we've had kind of smaller classes here and there. We got up to 5 last year and now 6 this year. But what I really like is when we look at the class of 2024, which saw Edric move inside, and Dom Kirks, who, it's going so-so, but the last 2 years, so in 25 and 26, to pair Zion Grady with Epi, who, we are pretty big believers in both of those two, now with Kari and Dre, I think you got 4 guys right there in back-to-back classes that's, you're going to have 2 super studs out of that, however way you slice it. I don't know who it's going to be, but there's going to be 2, maybe more absolute studs out of those 4 guys, in my opinion.
Yeah, they've now got the depth. They've got the numbers I think people are more comfortable with now. And then what I think this will allow them to do is, given their kind of the roster breakdown right now, and this will be hard. I'm not saying get excited about this yet, because it's going to depend on, supply and demand and things like that. But this does provide them, if there is a pass rusher in the portal this winter, if there's like a big name pass rusher in the portal, they'll have the resources, with losing some guys to the NFL, with just the breakdown of maybe missing numbers a year or two and not having a ton of veteran defensive ends. They'll be able to plug and play like a junior, senior type guy from the portal. I think that's where they'll probably try and attack moving forward. Now, if something falls into their lap here down the stretch in this final month, a 5-star type of pass rusher comes available, I'm certain they would explore that. But I think more realistically right now, what they'll probably do is be super aggressive in the portal if there's a pass rusher they like there, and it won't really block anybody. You won't get this, crowded depth chart there at the bottom where you've got, 8 guys at defensive end that are, first or second year players. It'll keep that separation for you on the roster. So, Larry Johnson's obviously a topic that gets a lot of discussion when it comes to recruiting, Ohio State in general. How much longer is he going to coach? All that good stuff. Being around him and covering him and things like that, he seems like someone who can't give it up as far as just loves coaching. But it is kind of interesting right now because the contract, I believe, is up after this year.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? What would you like to see happen, I guess, in terms of the plan moving forward? I mean, there's got to be a plan, whether Larry Johnson's coaching a few more years or not. There's got to be some type of hey, this is our move whenever it's time.
Yeah. I think with guys, and I think you're spot on about Larry personality wise. He's, one of these guys that this is what he does. This is who he is. It's his identity. And he is still on the job as hard as he's always been and doesn't want to give it up. And I think with guys like that, they end up kind of needing to get pushed out. Now, does it, they lose it before they recognize they lose it. And he is 73 now, I believe, 73, 72, 73, which is up there. But boy, he still seems sharp as a tack. It doesn't feel like there's been any fall off in any of the guys or the production. And it did feel, I think, for a while there, like getting really frustrating with maybe the lack of evolution to modern day recruiting and what these guys are looking for, who shows the most love. And it's felt like, all right, we're kind of trending down a little hard, a little fast, but I think we've seen a little bit of a resurgence here and it feels pretty good. Obviously the defensive line played fantastic in the playoffs. And right now we're watching a defensive line that's, didn't come in as talented as maybe the one that just left. And they're playing just as good as the ones from last year. So production wise, things feel really good. Recruiting wise, things feel really good. But at the same time, you want to get out in front of it before you see things start to decline. That said, I think, maybe I would like to see, I think I would have liked to see this actually last time around, but maybe a plan in place where you got somebody who's maybe like a coach in waiting. And now that you can afford to bring in a guy and he can coach like you're doing on the offensive line, and you can pay a pretty good amount to have somebody come and be in that role and pay him a good amount, somebody with some chops, somebody like Lowell Clark, who, it would have been great if he could have stuck around. And you have the ability now to do that. I would like to see that happen. I think that sounds like a pretty decent idea. But boy, it would be nice to have him back. And he is just killing it down in Texas too, on top of it. Who knows? Maybe you can get him back. I mean, he is just the outside, is it outside linebackers or
yeah, I believe that's correct.
Yeah. He's not the defensive line coach.
Right.
So like something like that might even be a possibility.
Yeah. And, I don't know what the long-term plan is with Miguel Patrick. They hired him from the high school ranks down in Georgia. He was at Cedar Grove as a head coach. That he worked here, I think it was just a year or two. I don't think it was more than 2 years, and ended up at UAB, was given more responsibility at UAB, has since come back. So has that been enough for them? I don't know, but they've kind of used him as well in the recruiting process. I know he's got the connections in Georgia as well. So anytime there's a defensive line prospect in Georgia, you do have to kind of give him a little bit of a hockey assist on that because he's so well respected down there. But it'll be interesting to see kind of how they massage that situation. Here's what I will say. I think the last year and a half since the portal has really taken off and all the rules have seemed to have gone out the window in terms of, guys can just kind of leave. It's a free agency type of situation. I do think it has, and now there's money involved. I do think it has less of an impact on schools who would negatively recruit against Larry Johnson's age, because if you rewind, a few years ago, because this is always going to be used against, literally the second year he was here at Ohio State, the rumors started. This has been a thing that's followed him for a decade now. It's never going to go away. Other schools aren't going to stop. But a few years back, you look at it, and if you're a kid, if you're an 18-year-old kid, you're a senior in high school, you love Larry Johnson, and you want to play with him or play for him, but you don't know what his long-term future is, and you're not getting paid, and your ability to transfer is very limited. You may have to sit out a year. You may there's all sorts of hurdles you have to go through to transfer. You're going to really consider that in terms of, do I really want to go to Ohio State and have him leave after my freshman year? Now, if you're getting paid, I think that evens the playing field a little bit, because okay, this is no longer I'm just working as a student here and, getting my tuition. Now you're actually making some money. And so it's more of a professional environment So I don't think coaching movement like that is as serious unless it's the head coach. And I also think just the idea that the freedom of movement now is if I go somewhere, like look at, for example, Julian Sayin. I mean, he was on campus for like a cup of coffee at Alabama. Nick Saban left. He left. I can just leave. If Larry leaves, I can just leave. It's fine. And I'll find another place right away, and there will be no issues. And so I think some of the new rules may actually insulate Ohio State a little bit from some of that negative recruiting here.
As we look at the ripple down effect from how much that has affected everything from the psychology of a recruit coming up, that's something I never even considered. I think you're absolutely spot on with that point. It used to mean a lot. And like you said, this has been going on forever because 10 years ago, we're talking about if I'm working for somebody else, that's a 63-year-old defensive line coach. You want to go there? Now he's 73. It's never stopped. It's certainly not going to stop. But I think you're absolutely right. What's the impact of that when I'm going to go and learn from the guy who has the reputation of being the greatest defensive line coach that there is at one of the very best programs in the country? And if he retires and I don't like it, I can just leave.
Or I could stay and collect a paycheck.
Yeah, it's a win-win. What do you know? So I think you're right. That absolutely takes the firepower out of that, which was once pretty powerful. It was getting pretty powerful, and it was getting to the point where I was starting to feel like, I don't know if this is sustainable. The fact that he was losing energy in recruiting, never was a very stick-to-itive kind of recruiter anyway, but things were changing, and then the negative recruiting on top of it, it almost felt like the 24 class was like, I was starting to think, okay, this might be untenable moving forward much longer like this. And, since then, which kind of coincides with what you're talking about here, things have gotten better and better.
And like Larry Johnson is such a relationships person. I think he takes it kind of personally when kids don't want to, like when kids decide to go out. It's just he's selective, and it just like the kids he clicks with, he really kind of tries to focus on that in the relationship building. And there is still an importance in that. But it has been a little bit of an adjustment with all the other stuff now. And, I've had many parents of players and high school coaches of players over the last, let's call it 6 or 7 years, at various points in a kid's recruitment tell me, like, look, if they knew Larry Johnson was going to be there all 3 or 4 years they were going to be there, they'd already be committed. And some of those kids did end up signing with Ohio State, and it worked out, but others didn't. Others just couldn't trust that he was going to be there. And that's before you're getting paid. That's when you're playing for free, essentially. That's when you can't transfer freely if you don't like what's happening. And so I do think, there's some give and take here. There's some pluses and minuses to the situation as it stands today with the new rules, with the NIL rules and the portal and everything else. So we'll see. But it looks like watching him at practice and things like that, there is not a dip in energy, enthusiasm. He's the same guy. So it's just a matter of what he wants to do, I think, at this point, and we'll see what happens. But definitely a huge pickup here with Dre Quinn, and definitely another example of the Larry Johnson relationship factor playing out. This was his guy. Edric Houston was his guy a couple years ago. Edric Houston went to Buford. Dre Quinn spent time with Edric Houston this weekend. Edric's having himself a very nice time in Columbus right now. I know he's very happy being here and starting to play pretty well too. And so this was all kind of a good mix this weekend to get Dre Quinn on campus and get this done. So that'll do it here for this one. We got another one coming right back with another commitment we're going to talk about, and then we will get to our early week kind of recruiting overview. So you guys will have a lot of recruiting coverage this week here on the channel. So like and subscribe the video, or like the video, subscribe to the channel if you have not already. Thank you again, Juck. And yes, we'll be back here with another one right in a minute. Thank you.